we have not had national security strategy since the Cold War ended. That would be 4 presidents ago, and 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. We've just had tactical incursions, excursions with various countries, and that has not made us more safe. Plus, we've had an incredible disappearing Congress.
Hello and welcome to the G0 World Podcast. I'm Ian Bremmer, and with Biden's first trip abroad in the books, I'm sitting down with one of our favorite foreign policy and national security minds. That's Jane Harman. She's a former 9-term U.S. Congresswoman from California, where she served as the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. She's also President Emerita of the Wilson Center, bipartisan institute down in Washington, D.C., and author of the new book, Insanity Defense: Why Our Failure to Confront Hard National Security Problems Makes Us Less Safe. Quite the title. Let's get to it.
The G0 World Podcast is brought to you by our founding sponsor, First Republic. First Republic, a private bank and wealth management company, understands the value of service, safety, and stability in today's uncertain world. Visit firstrepublic.com to learn more.
Jane Harman, former U.S. Congresswoman from the state of California and author of the new book, Insanity Defense: Why Our Failure to Confront Hard National Security Problems, and they all are, make us less safe. Jane, great to be with you.
And you too, Ian.
So, congratulations on the book. Start with something simple, which is, the old saying goes, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And your book argues that that has been the state of American national defense strategy for decades. So how so?
Well, bingo. And your point is that we keep doing the same things and thinking things will change. And my point is that we have not had national security strategy since the Cold War ended. That would be 4 presidents ago, and 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. We've just had tactical incursions, excursions with various countries, and that has not made us more safe. Plus, we've had an incredible disappearing Congress, which is my last chapter. And now we have a president with foreign policy chops, and we have an A team on the case, and we're improving dramatically.
I mean, to the extent that there has been a national security strategy since 9/11, I guess you would argue it has been by default the war on terror, right? Because everything is sort of through that lens. Every priority has been through that lens until the start of the pivot to Asia, yeah?
Yeah, but I wouldn't call it a strategy. We got attacked. I was there. I was the ranking member on what was then the Special Subcommittee on Terrorism, but then I became ranking member on House Intelligence. And after that, I was on the Homeland Committee, which was formed after we set up a Homeland Security Department, et cetera, et cetera. But we didn't have a strategy. It was they hit us, we're going to hit them back. We hit them back in Afghanistan. There was an actual authorization to use military force. That's what Congress is supposed to do. And we carried out the mission. And then
with
we
a large
stayed.
Coalition.
Yeah, we stayed. And then what? And look at Afghanistan now. You can debate, and I'm sure you're going to ask me whether we should be leaving our military mission, not leaving, or not. But is Afghanistan more safe because we went there? Just saying.
Well, we didn't go in to make Afghanistan more safe, Jane, to be fair.
Well, to be fair, we went in to get the guys who hit us. And since then, we stayed, clear hold build to make Afghanistan better. And we got some of the guys who hit us, but now there are a bunch of other guys who want to hit us who were not in Afghanistan and didn't attack us on 9/11. And we have been involved in 40 military missions in 19 countries without any serious overview or oversight by Congress, because Congress has not stepped up until maybe last week to seriously take action to revise these tattered AUMFs that were passed, one against Afghanistan and 2 against Iraq, both of which
these are the authorization for use of military force, which you voted for back in 2001 after the attack, and just kind of goes on and on and on, and in large part because Congress has no intention of taking responsibility for anything else, right?
Well, until last week. I mean, the House is now moving basically to repeal the 2002 AUMF, which was action against Iraq, which I voted for because I believed the intelligence. I described my mistake in the book, and the intelligence was faulty. But at any rate, to repeal that one. And then next up has to be a focus on this threadbare, ancient, quaint 2001 AUMF, which really no longer applies to the military missions we're engaged in. And my point is, last time I looked, we have a U.S. Constitution. I'd like to keep it. It has 3 articles. 1 is Congress, which passes the laws. 2 is the executive branch, which carries out the laws, not makes the laws. And 3 is the federal judiciary. So, oops, where is Article 1? Where is Congress? The Congress can't get things done because of toxic partisanship. But the other reason it can't get anything done is members don't want to own the consequences. And that is chicken.
I mean, it's kind of like everything. It's like the filibuster. It's like voting rights. It's like migration. I mean, people know what the answers are on all of these issues, but no one wants to take responsibility. Why should we believe that the authorization for the use of military force, in some ways the greatest responsibility, why should we believe that Congress would act any differently on that?
Well, hope is not a strategy, but I am always hopeful. If I weren't an optimist, I wouldn't have served in Congress for 9 terms while it got more and more partisan. But just saying, Joe Biden, our president, was the chair for decades of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and he supports Congress doing this. That's different. And the chairman of the committee, Bob Menendez of New Jersey, supports doing this. And the House has made noises to do it. And so I think there is a possibility. I also think with this push, which may never get anywhere toward bipartisanship, that some Republicans are stepping up, and they are, to support some Democrats. Problem, Ian, is that the business model of Congress is basically broken. It's blame the other side for not solving the problem, because if you work with the other side, you are bipartisan, and that makes you dog meat in your primary. And getting reelected is now more important than solving problems for the country. And that is a tragedy. And that is weakening Joe Biden's effectiveness abroad. I mean, I think he's pretty effective, and I think his team is the A team. And he's our first experienced foreign policy president since George Bush 41. So over 4 presidencies, point I make in the book. But, to have America in this much turmoil makes him weaker.
Which hasn't in any way gone away. I mean, for bipartisanship, if you had an AUMF on mainland China, you could probably get it done in Congress right now.
Probably could. Congress is very bearish on China and has been for decades. Problem is, Congress doesn't really understand China, and understanding China takes a lot of effort. And I think this administration, as you point out, is going to be actually tougher on China than the prior administration. And you say softer on Russia. I wouldn't say softer. I would say more nuanced on Russia, understanding the difference between the threats posed by China and Russia, and hopefully keeping them apart, not pushing them together against us.
So, broader question, since we're talking about national defense strategy for the U.S., overall, do you think that our country today is safer than it was on September 10th, 2001?
Yes and no. That's a good answer, isn't it? Yes and no.
It's a nuanced answer.
Thank you. So anyway, yes and no, because we now have a homeland defense effort we didn't have before 9/11, although we are very, very susceptible to cyber attacks, especially ransomware. We have some defenses against that finally, but I'm just saying we are safer against physical attack, airlines blowing up. That we're safer against that. We're not safer against domestic terrorism. And a very thoughtful strategy was just released by the Biden administration on that. And it is quite separate from our connection to foreign terrorism. A lot of these domestic attacks are not connected to cells operating in Afghanistan or pick a place. So there's that. But so mixed on that. record. In terms of internationally, again, I think that the dangers of nuclear war are present but subsiding. We can talk about that. Again, I think our big threat at the moment, the perfect weapon, according to David Sanger of the New York Times, is cyber. So we have that, which wasn't there. So, and we have a broken Congress, and we have a lot to repair in the world, but we have a president who's set to do that. And I think he does have a foreign and national security strategy. First guy in 5 presidents.
Talk about what you think this Biden strategy is so that we can assess, number one, to what extent it's doable, and number two, to what extent it's the right strategy.
So I was elected to Congress in 1992. I was in the first post-Cold War class. I mentioned that in the book, and I mentioned the fact that I was a rookie member on the House Armed Services Committee, then chaired by Ron Dellums, if anybody remembers him, quite interesting guy, former Marine, who then became, over time, the congressman from Berkeley, California, which is a fairly left and very pro anti-war community. Let's put it that way. So,
Berkeley, absolutely.
And so,
demonstrations upon demonstrations, bookstores upon bookstores. Lots of inexpensive places to eat lunch. I remember it well.
But let's remember, well, you don't remember, but I remember the free speech movement in the 60s was free speech for everyone, not just free speech for one side. That's a kind of difference between then and now. And I kind of like free speech for everyone a little better. But at any rate, Dellums asked, what's our roadmap for the post-Cold War world? And there was really no answer. But here's the other part. As a member of Congress, I would put up card tables at farmers markets in California. I represented a coastal district, and everybody shops for homegrown, yummy veggies on the weekends. And it was a good way to meet folks. So I would set up my card table, and everybody would rant about how can the foreign aid budget eat up 50% of our annual budget? And why? As in point, the real answer is 0.001%. But people had no idea what our foreign policy, foreign aid posture was. So, and this has gone on for years. Nobody knows nothing. So the Biden approach is to, my shorthand, and Jake Sullivan, whom I talked to once about this, agrees, is to take the foreign out of foreign policy and to try to make what we do abroad relevant to what we do at home. And the articulation a few months ago by Secretary of State Tony Blinken and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is that the foreign policy of Biden is restore alliances, repair alliances, promote democracy, make the world safer, and do 3 other things, which are important, and they're related. They also have to do with the world. One is solve the pandemic for the world, not just for the U.S. And we made some strides at the G7 last week, maybe not enough, but strides. And another one is climate, which is a huge part of our security at home and security in the world. Think about it. Half the refugees in the world are climate refugees. They're not terrorism refugees. And the third part is terrorism. It's still a problem abroad, but it's also a problem domestically. And none of these things was articulated before as a strategy. And average folks who come to, talk to their members of Congress around the card table can get that. And I think that that's exactly what Biden is doing and working on. And his trip last week, I thought, was quite successful and focused on all this.
So, I certainly agree that an effort to tie foreign policy in a way that is seen as relevant by the average American, a foreign policy for the middle class, as I hear the Biden administration frequently talk about it, is one that is likely to be more durable over time. I understand why they want to leave Afghanistan in that regard. I understand the greater focus on climate in that regard. But you and I know, even if we could stipulate that they have some of the right answers there, the level of division inside the United States, the level of mistrust inside the United States, the nature of how polarized and incapable Congress is in passing legislation are extraordinary constraints on the ability of any executive to make the average citizen believe that this system is fighting for them?
You're right. And there's a steep hill at home, and the rock is big. And Biden is being tested right now on infrastructure, which is basically his jobs plan. And nobody can miss how crummy our infrastructure is in this country. And you travel abroad to, pick a place, and theirs is sometimes better. Let's not choose Italy, which is having many infrastructure tragedies. But at any rate, if he can't get progress on infrastructure, it will hurt him not just domestically, but internationally, because people are looking to see if this foreign policy for the middle class has legs. And I certainly hope it does. And the goal of reducing income inequality is a big part of making America stronger. And if America is stronger at home, America is stronger in the world. And speaking as president with accompanied by a partnership with Congress will make Biden much stronger. And so I'm just hopeful that he, because he has long-term relationships and really a good compass for how to talk to members of Congress, will be able to get somewhere. And the test is right now, this month.
If I wanted to push back on the broad strategy, I might say that the issue that aggravates the average American the most is that of the border and illegal immigration, an issue that's only gotten worse since Biden has become president. And the issue that exercises the average American the least, but is the easiest to push through Congress, is China. And Biden has therefore couched most of, whether it's infrastructure, jobs plan, foreign policy discussion, you name it, in terms of, I'm going to be tougher on China than Trump. Tell me I'm wrong.
Yes and no. Let's start with the border. Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, is clearly ambitious and, maybe has 2024 stars in his eyes. I have no idea. But he's spending money to build the wall and says Mexico is going to help. I've seen no evidence of that. But maybe he'll use some federal money that he's getting. Instead of giving it to his people, he'll build more walls. So he's making a big deal out of the border. It's a problem from hell, like many other problems. You can't just solve it by processing asylum claims faster, because that draws more people. You have to solve it by starting at the push factors, which Biden is trying to do. And in fairness, Trump was trying to do this. There was once a conference in Miami early in the Trump administration with Vice President Pence and Luis Alberto Moreno, who was then
running the IDB back then. Yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah, and
others trying to promote business investment in Central America and clean up the corruption. Well, we're seeing this movie again. It's the Kamala Harris movie. Hopefully she will get somewhere. But you can't just build the wall and say the problem's solved. You can get headlines that way. So I'm not assuming that the problem is getting worse at the border, or maybe it is this minute in terms of statistics, but I think it could get better. Back to China, it's another problem from hell. We want China to be our ally on climate. Otherwise, we're not going to reduce the climate threat to the world. And China could be our ally in several other respects. China's a major trading partner for us and everyone we like in Asia. I think it was very wrongheaded, I'm sure you agree with me, for Trump to pull out of our TTIP.
Yeah.
And we're now using the Quad, an alliance of Australia, Japan, us, and India to push against China, which I think is a very smart strategy. So we're doing that. But I don't think our China strategy is just going to be whack them over the head. I think our China strategy is going to be focused on nuanced sanctions, but also try to build up where we can the positive aspects of the relationship. And one more thing, Biden is poised, so I understand, to select a very capable ambassador to China, Nicholas Burns, very experienced, whom I think we all know and love, who now teaches at the Kennedy School and does other things, and runs the Aspen Strategy Group, which I've been a member of for decades. And I think that will help too.
So maybe let me just make it a little personal for a bit, because you've known Joe Biden for a long time personally. And I'm wondering, and you're there in Washington, D.C. right now and have been right through January 6th and the rest. What has surprised you most about his first few months in the White House, personally?
Well, first of all, being here on January 6th was absolutely horrific. It's something I never expected to see in my lifetime. I was here on 9/11 and walking toward the dome of the Capitol, where the Intelligence Committee was housed and where we were about to hold a meeting, and which everyone thinks was the intended target of the fourth plane that went down in Pennsylvania. So that got my attention. This was worse. And now that a lot of cable news is putting all the footage together and playing it back over and over again, it's more terrifying to watch it again somehow. Joe Biden wasn't president then, but what surprised me about his presidency, number one, he's much more hands-on as a leader than I fully understood. It's coming out now how he runs his meetings and what he does. But number two, and I love this, he's really enjoying the job. And, you learn this in Politics 101. I was in Congress for 9 terms. You got to enjoy it. I mean, there are really hard aspects of it. You got to take a punch and you got to enjoy what you're doing. You got to connect to people. And he is still doing the retail piece very well in spite of the enormous pressures on him.
I mean, as vice president under Obama, this is a guy that is most personally aware of what the job is, means, and does. So from that perspective, no surprises for him.
Yeah and no. I don't think vice president is president. I think sitting behind that desk and having the buck stop with him is very different. And I think he fills out the job very well, better than I expected. Not to say I wasn't excited about his election. I was excited about his election. But to say that, again, comparing him to his predecessors, he has a dimension they didn't have. He has the experience, exposure to Congress, and he has the foreign policy file, which they did not have. All 4 of them. I'm talking about Clinton, Bush 43, Obama, and Trump.
Biggest success so far for 6 months?
I hadn't thought about it that way, but I would say picking the A team for foreign policy and then having a very successful week in Europe and not over inflating expectations, but doing the right things and building the trip toward Russia at the end. I know I've read you and heard you say the Russia trip got too much attention, the Russia summit meeting. I agree that it did, but I also think that putting it in the first trip was the right thing to do. And with the G20 coming up, there's a chance that he could also meet with Xi. And I think it's important soon to engage with foreign leaders, hopefully with some record of success behind him in terms of his legislative agenda in Congress. That will really help.
Biggest mistake so far?
Biggest mistake. I think, people will throw tomatoes at me, but I think he needs to give bipartisanship more of a chance. And I think he's dropped a few things. Shelley Moore Capito was meeting with him on infrastructure, Republican from West Virginia. Susan Collins was leading the meetings on the first COVID package. And I think he should have let those conversations go on longer. I'm not sure why he stopped them. I'm not saying that something isn't replacing them, but in both cases, I thought these are very capable people. And I'm not sure why he dropped those conversations as fast as he did.
As we look at this infrastructure path going forward, you think the right thing to do is to push hard on just accepting this $1 trillion plus or wherever the bipartisans in Senate end up, and then see what you can get on a partisan bill? Is that the right way forward?
Well, maybe not. I mean, we haven't covered our expenses in this country for a long time. Our debt is ballooning. Our interest rates are going up, something your clients obviously are experiencing. And the cost of goods is going up, something I am experiencing. And so we have to have a strategy, part of this strategy for paying for programs going forward. And this is not a one-off, this infrastructure plus social programs. I mean, behind it comes a lot of other stuff that we want to get done. And so I think the Biden team is capable of doing this. We have to put more pieces on the puzzle board. And one of them is getting closer to a more responsible budget, not just a more responsible infrastructure plan. And I think we can do that. I remember the day, I was in Congress in the 90s when we raised taxes and cut spending in 1994. That was a career-risking move for Bill Clinton, who did get elected. And then in 1997, with Newt Gingrich as Speaker, I'm not shilling for Newt, although he has become an acquaintance of mine since we both served there. But most of us voted for a balanced budget. And that was a big deal. That made America stronger. And it led to a period of real economic growth until 9/11. So I'm just saying that there is a strategic way to get to a better place. And again, I'm the one saying to you that Biden has strategy and he has strategic thinkers in his government. So I can't answer that question just by itself. And I think they're thinking about this.
I mean, since you brought it up, and it's kind of an interesting question, I mean, there's an enormous amount of grassroots sentiment that we need redistribution, that we need rich people in America are not paying their fair share. Jane, you and I could certainly afford to pay more. What if you were in charge of making that happen, what should it be?
Well, I don't think a wealth tax makes a lot of sense, but I do think a fairer progressive income tax makes a lot of sense. And it was on the front pages of our papers a couple of weeks ago about the richest Americans pay no taxes. Well, oops, I'm not saying that's illegal, but I don't think that's smart. And I would rather see, these proposals have been out there forever, a simpler progressive system where everybody pays some tax. I get it at the bottom. There needs to be some alternative tax or some kind of a reverse tax, which was started in the Clinton administration, which was quite successful if you make under the poverty rate. But I do think there's a way forward that smart people have already thought about that Biden could start to press that would probably relieve the tax burden on those in the middle. I mean, he said he doesn't want to increase taxes for people earning under $400,000, which is a pretty hefty sum of money. But I think on a fair basis, to simplify the tax code and to make all of us pay a fair share is the right way to go, and we ought to do it right now.
Jane Harman, the new book just out. It's called Insanity Defense. Jane, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Ian.
That's it for today's edition of the G0 World Podcast. Like what you've heard? Come check us out at g0media.com and sign up for our newsletter, Signal.
The G0 World Podcast is brought to you by our founding sponsor, First Republic. First Republic, a private bank and wealth management company, understands the value of service, safety, and stability in today's uncertain world. Visit firstrepublic.com to learn more.